Hi, welcome to the very first one of the demos for these online modules on GIS through the Center for Digital Scholarship here at the University of Notre Dame. Today I just want to go over a little bit of the very basics of ArcGIS, and I've gone ahead and separated this out from the first real demo that we're going to do in the second module on raster data. Even though we're going to be manipulating and looking at a couple of different data types this week. And this is primarily because ArcGIS itself is a little bit quirky when it comes to how you add data and how you begin to really create a map document out of multiple different layers. So the very first thing that we do when we start working with ArcGIS is we load up the program. And you can see here I've already gone ahead and downloaded actually both the first and second demonstrations here. But the first one here is the one we're going to be working with mostly. And before we load ArcGIS, let's take a look at what's in here. What we have is a number of different files, each one of which is part of an individual layer. So when we load up the program, we'll only see an individual record for Indiana Places here and this particular satellite image that we see down here. So even though there are multiple different files, all of these are essentially one layer in the program itself. So go ahead and start up ArcGIS. You can either just simply go through your Start menu. I know you can only see part of mine right here, but basically what you're just going to look for is ArcMap. That's the two-dimensional visualization program here, either by searching for it in the box or going through the menu into ArcGIS and finding it. And once it loads up, and it may take a minute or two, it's a pretty big piece of software here. What we're going to end up with is the actual viewer that we'll work with in almost every one of these modules. And this is sort of what the load screen should look like. You have a bunch of standard templates you could deal with, some of which come with data already in them, like USA and World here, some of which are just simply page sizes. For almost every part of these modules, we're just going to choose blank map here. So if you're working off of your own computer, you could actually choose don't show this dialog in the future. I'm going to leave it up just so you're used to seeing what this looks like. But just go ahead and choose blank map. So this is the standard ArcGIS file view that we're going to see. We have a series of layers over in our table of contents here. We have a bunch of different menus up at the top, and then we have a whole slew of different tools up here, some of which should look very familiar: new, open, save, print, others of which may look a little bit different. And we'll work with these a little bit in a second here. Now the new, open, and save up here, we're used to thinking about those as if we would bring in data that way. Actually what these do is they save the map document itself. And all a map document is in ArcGIS is links to those data layers and how to display them. So we don't use these for adding in data. What we're actually going to use is this little button right here, this little sort of square with a diamond with a cross on it. And this is our Add Data button. So if you go ahead and click on that, it'll bring up something that for you guys probably looks more like this if you have never loaded the software before. And that's because of a few different reasons, but ArcGIS has kind of a legacy, old way of computers being organized view of the file system on a computer. So before we can begin to look in an individual folder, we have to first sort of map to it. We have to tell it where that location is, and then that'll be a preset kind of bookmark that we can go back to. And we do that by clicking on this button here, this Connect to Folder. Now I'd encourage you guys to store this someplace where you can get to it, store all of your data in all your GIS data in the same spot, and name it in sort of an intuitive, intentional way. So I have mine on my N drive here in GIS, and that's the same folder that I showed before where I have my demo 1 and my demo 2. I'm going to choose just to map to the GIS folder. That way I can get to all of them without having to remap to individual subfolders there. So just go ahead and hit OK. Now then it should look like this for you. And now you can go into demo 1. And this is showing those two layers that I talked about before. In this week's lecture, or this module's lecture, we talked a little bit about the difference between raster and vector data. And ArcGIS is actually showing us what types of data we have with these little icons right here. This thing that looks like a grid, individual pixels in there. This is raster data. These things that look like individual points or geometry. Some of them look like lines, some of them look like polygons, depending on what type of vector data they are, is right here. So we're going to go ahead and add both of these in. So you can either sort of click outside of it and drag up. You can hold down Shift or Control and click on both of them, but try to add them both in at the same time. Go ahead and hit Add. It'll think for a minute, and then it's going to load up a vector data that's all of the populated places in the state of Indiana, and then a raster layer that's a satellite image for sort of this northern Indiana section. So just a little bit on navigating in ArcGIS. We have all of the tools up here to sort of navigate, some of which should look pretty familiar. We have zoom in, zoom out, pan, which will let us sort of click and drag around. This full extent will zoom us back all the way out. These guys are fixed zooms in or fixed zoom out. You can see the scale changing up there. This will let us go back to whatever our previous extent was and kind of go back and forth that way. We'll get to all of these other tools later on in the modules. One other thing, you'll see me doing this relatively quickly throughout here. Your mouse button, I can't obviously show this in a screencast, but if you have a 3-button mouse you're working with, and I encourage you to not work off the trackpad on a laptop when you do GIS, because these tools will really save you a lot of time. The center wheel will let you zoom in and out. So go ahead and try that if you have a 3-button mouse. I find what zooms you in and what zooms you out to be pretty counterintuitive. Your results may vary, but go ahead and experiment around with that a little bit. And then if you hold down that center mouse button, that part of the wheel, it'll let you pan it. And this will work in pretty much any tool in the software. So it's a pretty useful way to begin to quickly navigate around. A few other things that we see up here, we have our layers in our table of contents. If I drag these around, you see that the points disappear behind the raster image. If I want to just see the extent of the raster image, I can always right-click on it and go down to Zoom to Layer. Same thing with the other one if I want to go all the way out. And then I could use my previous Extent button to go back to where I was before. So I encourage you guys to just sort of play around a little bit, explore at this point. One other tool that might be useful for you is this Identify tool. If you click on this, you see your mouse now has a little eye on it. And if you can hit one of those points, it'll give you a little pop-up window that tells you that that's Robble Woods, the county it's in, and a little bit of information in there out of that vector file. If you miss and hit the raster image, it's just going to give you pixel values for that particular spot. And this will all become clear. What this means will become clear quite a bit later on, actually next week, or the next module. So just experiment around a little bit, get a feel for how to navigate, get a feel for how to manipulate and add data into ArcGIS. There's no assignment for this particular demo. This is just to get you started with things. But one last sort of idea here is if you want to save this document, you can. What you would end up doing if you hit save, probably want to stick it in the same place that you're dealing with the other data. All this is doing is saving what layers are added in, not the data behind those layers, but what layers and how they're being displayed in the order, and the scale, the zoom, all those things. So it's a good way to save a map document if you wanted to be able to load it back up with all of the data in the same spot, or if you wanted to create kind of an important visualization, something we'll get to on later on in the semester, and then be able to reacquire that pretty easily. So that's really all I wanted to show you guys today. Please do experiment around a little bit, and feel free to email me with any questions or any comments on how this is working.